Hello and welcome back to the Son of the Morning channel, and you are here to watch yet another Ye Olde Comic Con Modern Comic review. Today what we're going to be looking at is issues 1 through 3 of Killadelphia by Rodney Barnes from Image Comics. Now, we'll do a review. I'm just going to flip through as I explain to you what's going on here. We start off here. This is Jimmy Sangster Jr., and it's a time in Philadelphia right now where they're facing their worst epidemic since the crack problem of the 90s. There's missing people everywhere, dead people everywhere, and then and he's sending an email to his confidant Josie, and talking about how he is, I'll just read it to you. It'll be easier that way. He says, "You're the only person that could understand what I'm about to do. It's the only way to be sure. I've always known I never would be the man my father was. That said, if the roles were reversed, I know he'd do what I'm about to do. May God forgive me." So he knows something is strange, but here at the bottom, we know that his father has died. And we don't know exactly the circumstances yet, but his father has died, and we sort of learn that he wasn't very happy with his father. So we flip to the next scene here, and this is actually his father here, and he is looking for this fugitive. This fugitive's name is Tevin Tompkins. He goes by the pseudonym Seesaw, and he knows he's gonna find him. However he can, he's gonna kill him. So then we sort of flip forward here to the modern times, and this is Jimmy Sangster Jr. with his partner, but you know, nothing special is happening here. We'll just flip through. So here's where I wanted to sort of start it here. We can see here by the pink lettering box that this is Jimmy Sangster Sr., who has been murdered. He was probably murdered trying to go after Seesaw, which kind of saw there. And so Josie is here, and she's with Junior now. And I'll just read to you what the inner thoughts of the dead Jimmy Sangster Sr., because they're very interesting. He says, "After years of one-upping the bad guy, I guess I was due. Oh, Josie, how many times have you and me locked down at some unlucky you-know-what? Who knew I'd be joining the club? World slipping away. I'm sorry." So he's saying that sort of as his dying words. Now here we can see that Junior is burying Senior, and he's really not all that upset about it, it seems. He's happy to bury his father, and we see that is probably something to do with there was some domestic abuse in the house when he was young. When he visits his childhood home, he finds his father's journal, starts reading through it. Then we're back here in the morgue. Josie notices that all of the bodies that are coming in have yellow fever, which has had a vaccine and hasn't been around since about 1953, at least in America. The body also appears to have human bite marks, and unfortunately the dead are starting to come alive. So she's telling all of this to Junior, we'll call him, and they decide that they're going to keep this between themselves for now. And so from there, Junior decides he's going to do some investigation, and I'm going to just give you some of the info. We'll flip around a bit. In his research, he found that there's a series of murders in Philadelphia in the 1950s, and the killers referred to themselves as the Son of the Republic because of their allegiance to former President John Adams, the first John Adams, the second president of the United States. He finds out that John Adams had yellow fever after returning from a Caribbean trip in 1814. He sort of, this definitely clues him into that there's something is not right. So, like I said, I'm just flipping around so you can see some stuff here. He learns that Adams' tomb has been vandalized. So let's get to that point there. Where is it? Oh, I guess I've missed it. Sorry. So this is where he's visiting the site of John Adams' crypt, coffin, whatever you want to call it. The guy who works there says that the tomb had been repaired after the war in 1876, and Jimmy asks him, what do you know about vandalism? And so basically you can see that he's already thinking that something is not quite right, but there is a body in the coffin, so there is that. So Junior is now after Seesaw. He's pursuing him, he's going after him, and he realizes here that he's a vampire. He realizes that he's a vampire and he needs to get away from the situation as fast as possible. So now that there are vampires in Philly, he surmises that John Adams might have had something to do with it because of the yellow fever. Now, yeah, that's some serious detective thinking, but hey, what can you do? There are vampires everywhere, is what we're about to learn. From the journal that he picked up from his father, he learned that he'd been working on a similar case with Josie. But he kept stuff from her, didn't tell Josie where everything that she needed to know. Josie then tells him where his father died, so he goes to Hell Hall, which is what it's called, to find the crypt. And then we'll just flip ahead a little bit here. Wanted to read this to you here. He says, as the nurses and doctors rushed into the room, I left. Only place else to go on earth was to my father. When I opened the car door, he looked at me and said, what took you so long? Now, what's so interesting about this is that the scene right before it is he's talking about how his mother was sick. And his father would visit, and eventually his father stopped visiting and would wait in the car. And whenever he would get back, he would open the car door, and his father would say the exact same thing to him, except this time he has now found his father, who is, the undead. So that is the end of issue number 1. And we'll move along to issue number 2. So, with Seesaw is given this issue starts off with Seesaw's grandmother being sick. She's in the hospital and she appears to be dying. he comes to visit her and wants to turn her. He hasn't done anything yet, but we know that he wants to turn her. So from there, Junior takes his father to Josie and asks her to examine him, and asks her where she keeps the blood so that they can feed him. Sangster Sr. describes how he could feel the leader inside of him, and that he was one of Adam's soldiers. And so here Josie says, "Who is this Adams we're talking about?" Junior replies, "John Adams." And then, so basically, from there, they sort of explain to Josie the theory that former second president of the United States, John Adams, might actually be the person who is behind all of this. Senior mentions that he is their patient zero. Now, one thing I really wanted to show this, because I just thought, for starters, the art in this scene by Jason Sean Alexander is absolutely fantastic. Now, what's happening here is there's this little girl walking down the street, and this guy, whether he's a real cop or a fake cop, or someone pretending to be a cop, pulls over to try to give her a ride. She sort of says she's not supposed to go anywhere with strangers. He explains that he's a policeman. She goes with him, and then he, of course, pulls over in an alley, kind of revealing himself to be the pedo type, at which point she says to him, "You look more like a Norman Becker, 54, 3 kids, C student at Syracuse, wife Margaret, who you're really not attracted to anymore, and a lovely gated community of folks who'd surely frown upon their community watch leader in an alley with a cute little black girl." So basically what happens from there is she ends up kidnapping him. So Senior, Junior, and Josie start to plot to get to Adams, but Senior notes that he's heavily guarded by vampires from the Revolutionary War. They fear that Adams will try to turn all of Philadelphia into vampires, so they start re-killing all of the dead people in the morgue. And, okay. Did we miss that? Oh, moved the camera, sorry. So you can see here they're starting to talk about killing them, and they have this little debate. Isn't murder wrong? And it's just sort of like the funny little scene. Well, it isn't murder if they're already dead, and I just like the little thanks for clearing that up. I thought that was kind of funny. So then we find that the little girl that brings the pedo as a sacrifice to her crypt, or whatever you want to call it. She torments him while he's tied up, but then the leader, who is John Adams, tells her that the guy's scared enough already, and that she should not torment him too much. Then we see John Adams in his current form for the first time. She apologizes for it, and now we know who our main villain is that we're dealing with. Now, what they do is they basically set a whole bunch of vampires free that haven't eaten for a very long time upon this so-called cop, and Seesaw's not too impressed by this situation. He's not happy with the way that Adams is doing things. They argue a little bit, and Seesaw is questioning Adams' methods, and then he eventually says he takes off. He says, "I'm out." After killing all of the dead people in the morgue, they move to the refrigeration unit to find that everybody in the refrigeration unit has now turned into vampires, as you can see right here. So then we flip back to the hospital where Seesaw's grandmother is dying. She does actually end up dying. Seesaw does come to see her. We don't know if he turns her or not, but I guess we'll find out in the end. But at the very least, another great illustration here by Alexander. Seesaw says they are going to know your name. So I don't know if that means they're going to know her last name or her name because she's going to be a vampire. We don't know. Interested to find out. At any rate, that brings us to our most recent issue, number 3. Now, number 3 starts out really interestingly with John Adams sort of just reflecting. He and the Founding Fathers, he says, were very naive. Overthrowing the British made them arrogant. They created a society of self-actualization. He knows that the Founding Fathers would obviously not approve of what he's been doing now, but as he says here, he has perspective. He's seen things that they haven't. He's seen technology, war, everything like that, and he's fine with what he's doing. So we pick it up again here with Senior, Junior, and Josie all killing vamps like crazy, followed by what I found here to be a very, very funny father and son bickering while they're trying to figure out what the next move here is. When we turn back, we have more reflection from Adams. He's thinking about how he was in a horrible position as president. He was the vice president to the first president of the United States, and George Washington was just going to be a very hard act to follow for anybody. Mentioning that how recently he had been at a play and the crowd laughed upon hearing his name. So after his presidency was over, he decided to distance himself from politics, but he got bored and went to the Caribbean on a Unitarian mission. So we'll flip the page. He goes into the forest. Unfortunately, camera moved again. Unfortunately, the people that he's going to help in the forest are vampires, and they then turn him into a vampire. And I think this is very interesting. These panels, these couple panels here over here, I want to read it to you. He says, "I awakened a different entity. The shortcomings of my body's aches, pains were no more. My guide explained what I was." And he gave him this book that he tells him it has all of the answers that are going to allow him to rule the world, that it's a book of magic. And he said that he's going to get to take his wife with him, and it's unfortunate that the name John Adams is going to be a footnote on history, but that nobody's really going to know that where the story really ends. So next, Josie Jr. and Sr. decide that they should go check out one of these nests. So that's what the plan is there. Next, we flip to a confrontation between one of Adam's henchmen and Seesaw. And Seesaw is confronted by this guy. We learn that his problem is that Adam says that everything is about making a better America, where class, race, money aren't important, but he sees following Adams as following the same flawed ideas that have held black people back for years and years and years. He doesn't want a system at all. He just wants to be free. So then this is just an interesting scene about John Adams reflecting about all of the technological changes that he viewed as he grew older. Well, as he stayed the same age, but as he grew older through time as a vampire. So him and his wife returned to America armed with this book that they believed was magic. And so what ends up happening is he uses these sort of influence and vampire powers that he has to help his son John Quincy Adams become a 2-term president, which he is extremely proud of. At some point in time, both Abigail Adams and John Adams are going to have to die because you can't live forever unless you're a vampire. So Abigail went first. John Adams decided to stay around for a little bit longer to help his children out. But he does eventually put himself into repose. Now, next thing that's really important here too is that where Senior's approaching the crypt, he can feel it calling to him. So it's a very ominous feeling for him. Now we get back to Adams, and this is sort of where we start to humanize Adams as a vampire. It's kind of interesting because his wife at some point comes to him and says that she feels that till death do us part no longer applies to them. Abigail wants to end their that patriarchal construct. She wants to live freely. This hurts Adams immensely, but he goes along with it. It was actually Abigail's idea to go after the poor and the destitute first, as their lives and circumstances would make them easier to turn. And she also notes that the privileged would need some coaxing. Now, I can't show you the next page. So, let's do that. Sorry. As at the den, Senior is met with constant depressing thoughts. He's thinking about his dead wife. He's thinking about the horrible relationship with his son. He's thinking about that he doesn't have a purpose, that sort of thing. Then he comments, James Sangster died. The thing that is thinking these thoughts is a monster. So he leaves the crypt, and before we go to the next page, even though I can't show you this illustration that my hand is currently covering, it's fantastic. It's such great work. Anyway, now he's left the crypt. He's on his way back, and he gets home just in time as the sun is rising and beginning to burn him. And that is sort of where we are left with the cliffhanger, leading us into the next issue, number 4, which comes out tomorrow, which is December 26th. And I absolutely can't wait for this issue to come out. I can't wait to see how this resolves. Now, I believe that this is an ongoing series that's going to run in 4-issue arcs. So I feel as though issue number 4 is going to have a climax to it, but also may lead us down the path to what the next story is going to be. I'm very much looking forward to picking this up tomorrow. I will definitely be picking it, on Wednesday. Or is today Monday? I've been saying I said February 26th anyway, which is Wednesday. Whatever. On Wednesday, I will be picking this up, February 26th, and I will be reviewing issue number 4 for you. Like I said, I find that this series is one of the most extraordinarily original series that I've read in a very, very long time. I highly encourage everybody to go pick up these 3 issues, and on Wednesday the 26th, go pick up issue number 4. Rodney Barnes has done a fantastic job writing this series, and Jason Sean Alexander's illustrations are absolutely fabulous behind them. So thank you for joining me here today. This is the Son of the Morning. You've been watching another Ye Olde Comic Con Modern review. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video and the channel. If you want to leave a comment, go ahead. Please be nice to each other. Like I always say, if you want to make fun of me, go ahead, I can take it. See ya.